Did you know Nationwide is so much more than a great insurance company? They're one of America's largest financial services companies. Like how I'm more than just quarterback Peyton Manning, I'm also meditating Manning. For your insurance and financial needs, Nationwide is on your side.
Nationwide Investment Services Corporation, member FINRA, Columbus, Ohio.
This is the FPL Draft Zone, your fantasy team's best signing of the season.
Game week 4 is over and some things never change as Haaland hauls again. We take a look at a few squad players pushing for starts and ask if they're worth getting in now. And we've got all your waiver wants for Game Week 5. Hello and welcome to the FPL Draft Zone, a podcast all about Draft FPL. I'm Dom Crofts, I hope you are well. And today we're going to be taking a look back at all the action from Game Week 4 and then throwing forward to Game Week 5, where there is the small matter of Manchester City against Arsenal to look forward to. But first up, we're going to run through all the results from Game Week 4. In the early kickoff on Saturday, it finished Manchester United 3, Southampton 0 in a rare game where the Saints did not dominate possession. United ended up with just over 55% of the ball, but as we predicted on last week's show, Bruno Fernandes loves a bit of the South Coast, and he returned again, as did Marcus Rashford and Alejandro Garnacho, both of whom were among the scorers. Cameron Archer missed a penalty for the home side when the score was 0-0. Then there were 6 games at 3 o'clock on Saturday. Brighton drew 0-0 with Ipswich. João Pedro missed out for the home side. Brighton had 21 shots in this one, but only 6 were on target, and Muric saved all of them to bag maximum bonus points for the keeper. Crystal Palace fought back from 2-0 down to draw at home to Leicester. Vardy and Mavididi got the goals for the Foxes. Mateta bagged a brace for Oliver Glasner's side. Fulham drew 1-1 with West Ham. We said Emil Smith-Rowe was nailed on to return in this one, having been linked with West Ham year in, year out under David Moyes, and he did grab an assist for Raul Jimenez's opener. Danny Ings got the equaliser late on for the Hammers. Liverpool's unbeaten start to the season came to an end at Anfield as they lost 1-0 at home to Nottingham Forest. Callum Hudson-Odoi getting the only goal of the game in that one. And Manchester City conceded a very early goal at home to Brentford, but it did not matter. Why? Because they have got Erling Haaland. Exterminate. Haaland got his 8th and 9th goals of the season in only his 4th match of the campaign. In the early evening kickoff, Everton threw away another 2-0 lead to lose 3-2 at Aston Villa. Dwight McNeil got a goal and an assist for the Toffees. We'll talk about him again later, having recommended him last week, but it was Ollie Watkins who made the difference. He scored twice before John Duran scored an absolute beauty to turn the game in favour of the hosts. And then there was a rare 8 o'clock kickoff on Saturday night as well, and it took place at the Vitality, where it ended Bournemouth 0, Chelsea 1. Chelsea managed just 0.70 XG in this one compared to Bournemouth's 1.89. But Sanchez had a very good game for the visitors. He saved an Evan Nielsen penalty. He kept his side level with some decent saves before Christopher Nkunku won it late on for Enzo Maresca's side. Sunday's matches started with the North London derby between Spurs and Arsenal. That one finished 1-0 to the Arsenal. Gabriel getting the only goal of the game and earning owners a massive 15-point haul. And then wrapping up the game week, it was Wolves, it was Newcastle, it was at Molineux. It ended 2-1 to Newcastle. Lamina put Wolves in front, but 2 absolute bangers from Shah and Harvey Barnes turned the game on its head for the Toons. So those were the results, but who were the players that made you wish you had them in your draft team? And who were the players that you'd happily swap for a Mars bar and a packet of crisps? It's time for winners and losers.
The FPL Draft Zone. Winners and losers.
First up, let's talk winners, and we have to mention him again, Erling Haaland, who scored a brace in Manchester City's win over Brentford. He is in a relentless mood this season, and if he continues at this pace, he is on course to score, wait for it, 85.5 goals in the Premier League this season, which would probably satisfy most of the people that own him in draft. There were doubts over whether he would start this one, but he did end up playing the full 90. And after City's Champions League game against Inter on Wednesday, it's Arsenal next for the big Norwegian. Emil Smith-Rowe also deserves a shout-out this week after a lovely assist in Fulham's draw with West Ham. The Arsenal man is edging ever closer to a full 90 minutes under his belt. He managed 72 minutes on Saturday, and he picked up his second return in 4 games since signing for Fulham. He also earned a bonus point for his efforts as well. Arsenal defender Gabriel is also a winner this week after his winning goal in that North London derby. The Brazilian got maximum bonus points as well to take that game week total to 15 points, and it's now 3 clean sheets in the first 4 games for Arsenal. So if you have defensive coverage from the Gunners, you are loving life right about now. And 2 Leicester players also make it onto our winners list this week. Steffi Mavididi, who was so good in the Championship last season but has lost his place in the Leicester starting 11 this campaign. Well, he returned to the first team on Saturday, and he returned with a bang as he scored for the Foxes in that draw with Crystal Palace. They picked up their second point of the season at Selhurst Park. And Wilfred Ndidi also returned with 2 assists playing in this bizarre advanced midfield role he's been given by Steve Cooper. But it is now 3 assists in 4 games for the Nigerian. So Steve Cooper obviously knows what he's doing. As for losers, we talked about Leicester. What about their opponents on Saturday, Crystal Palace, and their defenders who continue to underwhelm? There were such high hopes for the Eagles this season. They managed to hold on to Mark Gahey. Their backline looks really good on paper, but they have conceded another 2 goals this weekend to make it 7 goals conceded in 4 games so far. And next up for them, it's a trip to Everton, where surely their fortunes will turn sooner rather than later, and then a home game against Liverpool. Other losers this week are Johan Wissa owners. Unfortunately for them, Mateo Kovacic's late tackle on the Brentford and DR Congo striker could see him miss a couple of games for the Bees, which would be a massive blow given the form that he has shown so far this season. And having played City and Liverpool in their first 4, Brentford now have 3 very winnable home games in their next 5. But if Wissa is out, along with Thiago, and with Ivan Toney counting his cash in Saudi Arabia, suddenly it's looking very lonely up top for Brian Mbeumo, who has the weight of an entire football club on his shoulders. Although, it could be an opportunity to invest in 1 or 2 other Brentford assets, and we'll be discussing them a little bit later on. So that's some of the winners and some of the losers. But who earns this week's ultimate accolade? It's time to reveal our hero of the week.
Hero of the Week.
And this week's Hero of the Week is Ollie Watkins, who made a goal-scoring return to fitness and form for Aston Villa, having missed out on England's Nations League games over the past fortnight. Watkins scored twice in Villa's comeback win over Everton. He bagged maximum bonus points as well. And with John Duran breathing down his neck in the battle for a first-team place, he has risen to the challenge and he has returned to form at the perfect time. Villa begin their Champions League adventure this week, and then it is a lovely run of fixtures for the team from the Midlands. They have Wolves and Ipswich to come, so more goals and more points could be in the offing for owners of Ollie. He has found his form, he has found his fitness, and he could be finding the back of the net and firing you up your draft league if you're lucky enough to have him in your squad. All bow down and hail Ollie Watkins, our hero of the week. Hero of the Week. So, we are now 4 game weeks into the new season, and there are 34 game weeks left for you to ensure that you are celebrating draft success at the end of the campaign and not moping about having suffered fantasy humiliation. So in a moment, we're going to talk waivers, ones to watch, and much, much more. But first, let's take a look at the fixtures we've all got to look forward to in Game Week 5. And it all starts with a London derby in the East End. It's West Ham against Chelsea. West Ham won this fixture 3-1 last season, and they've won 2 of the last 3 between these sides at the London Stadium, drawing the other. But Chelsea won the last time these two sides met, 5-0. That was back in May at Stamford Bridge. Then on Saturday afternoon, it's Aston Villa against Wolves, a Midlands derby, and Wolves might fancy their chances in this one. They have lost only once on their last 5 visits to Villa Park, although that was last season when they were beaten 2-0. This is also very much a game where defenders tend to pick up attacking returns because 6 defenders have scored in the last few matchups between these two teams. It's Fulham against Newcastle at Craven Cottage. Newcastle have not tended to travel all that well in recent months, but their record at Craven Cottage is crazy good. They won here last season in the league. They won here last season in the FA Cup. They did not concede a goal in either game. They have won in their last 5 trips to Fulham, and in that time they have scored 13 goals and conceded just once. It's Leicester against Everton. The home side will fancy their chances of picking up a win against the Toffees, but history is not on their side. Everton have only lost once in their last 5 visits to Leicester. They've won 3 of those games, and they drew last time out 2-2 with DCL and Jamie Vardy among the goal scorers, so not much has changed on that front from either team's perspective. It's Liverpool against Bournemouth at Anfield in what is as close to a guaranteed home win as humanly possible. Diaz, Salah and Jota all scored in a 3-1 win at Anfield last season. The season before, it was 9-0 to Liverpool, and there have also been a couple of 3-0 wins in the last few seasons as well, so knock that one down as a home win for Liverpool. It's Southampton against Ipswich at St Mary's in a battle between 2 of the promoted teams. Ipswich did the double over the Saints in the Championship, with Amari Hutchinson getting the only goal of the game at St Mary's. It's Spurs versus Brentford in a London derby. It is a game that promises goals based on recent fixtures. Spurs won 3-2 in North London last season and drew 2-2 at the G-Tech. Brentford won 3-1 at Spurs' ground the season before and drew 2-2 at home in the reverse fixture. So 17 goals between these two sides in the last 4 matches. And Brian Mbeumo has scored 3 of those goals. The late kickoff on Saturday sees Crystal Palace entertain Manchester United. Palace absolutely annihilated United at the back end of last season, winning 4-0. They are unbeaten in their last 4 games against United at Selhurst Park. And then there are 2 games on Sunday afternoon. It's Brighton taking on Nottingham Forest. Brighton were 1-0 winners in this fixture last season, and the season before it ended 0-0, so this could be a close affair. And then wrapping up the weekend, it's the biggest game of the season so far. It's Manchester City versus Arsenal. It finished 0-0 last time out in a fairly underwhelming match at the Etihad. But before that one, City had won the last 7 games in a row against Arsenal in Manchester, and they scored 20 goals in the process. So those are the fixtures facing us next weekend. But who are the players we should all be looking at ahead of that all-important waiver deadline on Friday morning at 11 a.m. BST? It is time for, yes, you know this now, Waiver Wants.
The FPL Draft Zone. Waiver Wants.
So we're going to go through a few players who we think should be on your radar this week, and we're going to do what we did last week and work our way through each fixture in order. So first up, it's that lunchtime London derby between West Ham and Chelsea. West Ham have had a solid, if unspectacular, start to the season so far, but it's in that striker area that there remain big question marks. And where there are question marks, there may well be draft opportunity. Michail Antonio has been the man that started every game of the season so far, despite the big money signing of Nicholas Füllkrug. Fulkrug is now out with an Achilles injury, which meant that Danny Ings got the last 8 minutes against Fulham on Saturday when they were in desperate need of a goal, and Big Danny delivered. He got the equaliser for West Ham, so now, maybe, he's in with a shout of starting. Whether he'll get that start is very much up in the air, but I do think West Ham fans right now would rather anyone than Michail Antonio, with a lot of talk that he is basically 5 years past his best now. Ings is going to be available on your waivers. No one's going to have picked him up yet. It would be a roll of the dice if you thought he might get the nod ahead of Antonio. But if you have a non-playing third striker and you need someone, anyone, literally anyone, who might get on that pitch and make an impact, then Ings could be worth picking up. It's one of those, I've got nothing to lose. My other option is a player who doesn't play football anymore, moves, that might just work out. The other option for Lopetegui is to play Jared Bowen up front and then give Somerville more minutes on the wing. He replaced Antonio at Craven Cottage, so if you need a fifth midfield option, maybe Somerville could be a possibility. He got 21 goals and 10 assists last season for Leeds United. So if he can get in that West Ham starting 11 and replicate anything like that form, he could be a game-changing signing. As I said, these moves are very much rolls of the dice and basically trying to second-guess Lopetegui's next move. But if you get that move right, it may well pay dividends. As for Chelsea, Christopher Nkunku is going to be the talk of draft for another week. Should you keep him was the discourse for the last few weeks. Now it's should you waiver him back in. For me, I think you just need to look at the way Maresca is managing that front line and steer clear. This weekend, Neto got a half and was then replaced by Jadon Sancho. Madueke got an hour and was then replaced by João Felix. And then Nkunku got a little run out in place of Nicholas Jackson. And that is just too much rotation for me. I am not tempted to get involved with any of those players right now. The number of minutes you play every week is a solid platform to build your draft team on, and none of those players are guaranteed decent minutes, so it is a steer clear for me. Chelsea also didn't look that good defensively at Bournemouth, but as we said last week, at least you know what you're going to get in terms of Maresca's defensive selection. And they do have some decent fixtures coming up, so if you do want some Chelsea coverage at the back, I suspect you will be able to get some in your draft league, unless it's a 12-person league or larger. Aston Villa take on Wolves, and we'll keep banging the drum for John Duran, who could still be available on some waivers and who showed again that he does not need many minutes to make an impact. He was brought on alongside Ollie Watkins against Everton, which was obviously as a result of the game's state, but it's not impossible to think Unai Emery may consider playing the two of them together at some point, particularly when you think about Morgan Rogers' obvious ability and talent, but his current lack of returns. You also have to factor in the fact that they are going to be playing 3 games a week for the foreseeable future now, with the Champions League kicking off this week. So I do think Duran is going to get plenty of minutes between now and the end of the season, particularly if he keeps this form up. Lucas Digne started a game for Aston Villa and got another assist, so if nervous managers have avoided him so far because of the signing of Ian Maatson, I would go for him. I would get him in if you can. I did this week, and he earned me 4 points. And Bogard played again at right back for Villa. So if Digne is already taken, he seems to be first choice in that position, while Matty Cash is out and could well be a decent route into that Villa backline. Wolves, on the other hand, well, they have a horrendous run of fixtures coming up, so they are a hard avoid. But just imagine having to face this lot in their next 5. Villa away, Liverpool at home, Brentford away, Man City at home, and then Brighton away. Vom, a vom, a vom, a vom, a vom, a vomtron. Fulham take on Newcastle. We mentioned Harvey Barnes last week, and he rewarded those of you who invested in him with a goal. But one other player I want to flag is Kieran Trippier, because now that the transfer window has closed in Turkey, he is going to be sticking around in the northeast until at least January, and I am sure that there are managers out there that have ditched him and stuck him on the waiver pile. I know that for a fact because I picked him up on my waiver pile this week. He is not guaranteed starts. He is behind Tino Livramento in the pecking order, but he has such a high upside that if you have a space at the back in your defence where you can just sit him on your bench for a few weeks and see what happens, I think that is a good move. He could easily take minutes of Livramento. He can fill in at left back as well. And if he gets in that starting 11, he is going to be a real attacking asset. He'll also be on set pieces as well, or certainly a large proportion of them. And Newcastle fans have already started to pine for him. During the game with Wolves, at Ginger Perlo said, Trippier, Tonali and Barnes would be having a field day against these if they were on our right-hand side. And he was right, because obviously Trippier and Barnes both came on and had a pretty big impact. At C_O_L_E said Tino could be a very good player, but for the minute Trippier is miles ahead of him, so why he isn't starting spins my head. Mech Toon Army said Trippier needs to stake his position until Christmas. It's imperative. And then after the game, at Charlie Bennett said Kieran Trippier's substitution changed the mentality of the team. His calmness and know-how was notable. That experience is invaluable. So one to monitor, I would say. And if he's on your waivers, I would be looking to get him in and sit him on the bench for a bit just to see if Eddie Howe reintegrates him into that Newcastle starting 11. Because if he does, you have picked up a top-tier defender that could make a huge difference to your draft prospects. I've done it, and I'm hoping it's going to work out for me. So if he's available, think about it. Well, that's all I'm saying. The other player of note in this one, from Fulham's perspective, is Raul Jimenez, who started ahead of Muniz and scored. He did not have a great game, but it does show you that maybe Marco Silva is not as wedded to Muniz as we all thought, and that could open up Jimenez as a possible striker option if things do continue to go south for Muniz. Leicester take on Everton. We've already talked about Steffi Mavididi as someone who had a great season last year in the Championship. He got that star and he got that goal against Crystal Palace on Saturday, and he may now be given a run in the side under Cooper. It is Leicester he's playing for, so we do have to remember that. They are going to be season-long strugglers. They are not going to score many goals, but to be fair to them, they have competed in every single game they've played in so far this season. They're not getting battered like Southampton are at home to Manchester United, and they're about to go on a very nice run of fixtures as well. It's Everton in game week 5, which is okay. Then it's Arsenal away, which is horrifically stinky. But then Bournemouth at home, Southampton away, Forest at home, and Ipswich away. So there could be more returns in store during that period. And Ndidi is another good fifth midfield option in larger leagues because he's got 3 assists now in 4 games playing in this advanced number 10 position. And despite us all wondering what the hell Steve Cooper's doing with him, it seems to be working. So either of them, or even Odsonne Edouard, who will be eligible to play from next week, are worth keeping in mind as squad rotation options in your draft team. Everton, they're surely going to win one day, right? Surely. They've got a few games coming up where they've got a good chance, I would say. They played well against Bournemouth. They played well against Villa. They imploded in both. But third time lucky, right? It's Leicester this week. But then, check this out. Palace at home, Newcastle at home, Ipswich away, Fulham at home, and Southampton away. So there are points aplenty there if they play the way they've played in spells in their last 2 games. The good spells I'm talking about. The good ones, not the bad ones. The bad ones, they're not going to get any points. But the good ones, points are plenty. Dwight McNeil was a player we recommended last week. He got a goal and an assist against Villa. He's got 3 returns in his first 4 games, playing in a side that has not won a point so far this season. And he remains that player that everyone's a little bit ashamed to own, but who just keeps ticking along. Liverpool take on Bournemouth. No real standout options here this week that we didn't mention last week. Darwin Núñez got 30 minutes against Forest, and I still think he'll start matches very soon. And Quansah is similar to Kieran Trippier in that he could be a great pickup if and when Konate gets injured, which is a yearly tradition, of course. And with Liverpool's Champions League campaign kicking off this week, I cannot see any way Arne Slot is going to play Konate in 3 games a week. So if someone has already given up on Quansah and he is in the waivers, target him this week, especially if Konate gets the nod ahead of him when Liverpool play AC Milan on Tuesday. Marcus Tavernier was someone we highlighted last week as a surprisingly high-scoring asset in terms of their underlying stats. He nearly opened the scoring on Saturday night against Chelsea when he fired a long-range strike against the bar. After Liverpool, it's Southampton at home and Leicester away for Bournemouth, so he could be worth storing on your bench this week and then unleashing in game week 6 and 7. And Enes Unal returned to first-team action against Chelsea as well. He forced Sanchez into a decent save late on. He can play in a deeper second striker role, so it's not impossible. He will force his way into Iraola's side alongside Evan Nielsen. And if he does, he would be a good third striker option as well. He's more one to watch than one to invest in right now, but good to be aware of his availability in terms of his fitness and his selection potential. Southampton take on Ipswich in a game which, if Southampton lose, you really will start to fear from them in terms of how many points they're going to get this season. Adam Armstrong did not play against Manchester United, with Cameron Archer preferred. He missed a penalty in his first start for the club, but he may well keep his place for the next few weeks. I'm not even sure he's worth picking up as a third striker option right now, to be honest, given the state of the Saints, unless of course you are in a much larger league where strikers really are at a minimum. But Aaron Ramsdale might be worth picking up as a goalkeeping option. He made 7 saves against Manchester United, he kept the score down, and he may have a few weeks this season where his individual performance might earn you a few extra points at the back. Similarly, Ipswich have a goalkeeper who has been widely mocked for his performances in the past, but who is not a bad fantasy asset in my opinion, and that is Arijanet Muric. He picked up maximum bonus against Brighton on Saturday to finish the day on 11 points. The Tractor Boys have the best chance of staying up of the promoted teams, in my opinion, so if you can get him in as a second keeper option, it could be a decent bit of business. Their run of games is not hideous coming up either, and when you're looking at keepers, it doesn't really matter, because unless they play for Arsenal, they're going to concede goals anyway. Spurs take on Brentford. Spurs did not play badly against the Gunners, but they were held at arm's length in the main. I thought Odeber offered a threat when he came on, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him get back into the team for this one. He commits players, which is something not many Spurs players seem to do. He's fast, and I think he would worry rival defenders a lot more than someone like Brennan Johnson. Most other Spurs assets will be taken, but Brentford may offer some value if that Johan Wissa injury is as bad as it looked, because with him out, Thiago out and Tony gone, their options up front are going to be so limited that Kevin Schade is probably going to have to fill in as their centre forward, which will mean that Fabio Carvalho will step in on the wing after his big money move from Liverpool. And that gives you 2 excellent options on this week's waivers. Schade has never been prolific. I think he's quite a frustrating watch, to be honest, but he is fast, he will cause defenders problems, and he is a relatively risk-free fifth midfield option, particularly if he is going to be playing up top. And Carvalho was excellent in pre-season for Liverpool. He was great last year as well in the Championship. And the fixtures are pretty nice for Thomas Frank's side. After Spurs, it's West Ham at home and Wolves at home. So I think Schade and Carvalho would both be very nice pickups this week if that Wissa news is bad. So keep an eye out for a press conference from Thomas Frank for further updates on that one. Is Crystal Palace against Manchester United at Old Trafford? I am still very high on Alejandro Garnacho. I said it last week, and I'm saying it again. He is a great impact player off the bench for United right now. He's got a goal and an assist already this season in just 139 minutes. So that's a return every 35 minutes. And I think it's only going to be a matter of time before he gets in the team at the expense of Amad Diallo. Last season, he got 14 returns. I think he will easily better that this season. And while he's unlikely to be on the waivers this week, the manager in your league who owns him may well be open to a trade. And I think that would be a good bit of business. It's not an easy run coming up for United. That is the downside. But that might actually suit them, as they do tend to look a little bit more of a threat against the better teams. After the Palace game, it's Spurs at home, where they will be given chances, and then it's Villa, Brentford, and West Ham. As for Palace, he might not have scored this weekend, but Palace fans were absolutely loving what they saw from Eddie Nketiah. He started slightly deeper at the Jean-Philippe Mateta in almost like a number 10 role, and he was excellent. At Back of the Nest said, Eddie was terrific. At Hunter CPFC said, I love Nketiah, by the way. Hungry, direct and a proper forward. Love him. And CPFC_Ralph simply said, Eddie, you have moved me. Oliver Glasner has already said that Nketiah is going to start regularly, otherwise they wouldn't have spent £30 million on him. So he is guaranteed minutes, he is a guaranteed starter, and I think he will really make an impact at Palace. He's probably not on your waivers, but if he is, snap him up, Buttercup. Palace defenders will be on your waivers. I'm almost sure of that, with the likes of Chalobah having only just joined the club. He missed the draw with West Ham, but Glasner will be hoping that he can make a difference, because defensively they have been rubbish so far. One to avoid for now, but one to keep an eye on for any sign of an improvement. On Sunday, it's Brighton against Nottingham Forest. A few Brighton assets worth discussing. And first up, Yankuba Minte, who has returned in 2 of his first 4 games, but who was fairly ineffective at the weekend against Ipswich. He's also got Simon Adingra breathing down his neck as well. He has got 2 returns in just 73 minutes of action this season. And I think this one is heading towards a little bit of winger rotation going forwards, which, if it does happen, will lessen the appeal of Minte to rival managers. So with that in mind, if you own Minte and you think he may end up being a rotation risk, this could be the week to try to get a trade over the line and move him on while his value is still high. He will still be a tempting proposition to a lot of draft managers, and you might be able to get some more secure minutes in his place with similar output. Kadioglu also got his first minutes for Brighton, so he'll be in that first team very soon indeed. If he's available, he's probably worth looking at. And then there are those players battling back from long-term injuries who could well be regulars in the near future. First of all, Pervis Estupinan, who didn't play this week, but he did play twice for Ecuador in the international break, and I would expect him to start this next game. And then there's Evan Ferguson, who is being eased back into action, but made his first Premier League appearance of the season in the draw with Ipswich, having come off the bench for Ireland against England. So all of those players could be viable draft options going forward, with Kadioglu and Estupinan the most nailed, and Ferguson a dark horse for minutes once he gets back up to speed. As for Forest, Seltz in goal has had a very good start to the season. Forest's underlying defensive statistics were strong at the back end of the last campaign, and this season they've already kept 2 clean sheets in 4 games. Seltz got maximum bonus points against Liverpool as well to earn him a 9-pointer. And they face Fulham, Palace and Leicester in their next 5. Alex Moreno is the one to watch for Forest though. He got 79 minutes at Anfield. He was in the bonus points despite getting a yellow card in this one. And we all know his attacking potential. So if he is now first choice in that left-back slot, which you would imagine he is, he would be a great waiver this week. I got him in the other week and then wavered him out. And now I'm wishing I'd wavered him back in. But, you know, them's the breaks. James Ward-Prowse also started in this one. And while he'll probably be waiver fodder most weeks, he's always a decent 5th midfield option based on his set-piece threat. And Jota Silva got the nod to replace Chris Wood towards the end of the game instead of Tayo Awoniyi. So maybe, just maybe, it's going to be Jota Silva who is second choice frontman for Forest behind the New Zealand striker going forward. And then, of course, finishing the weekend, it's the big one. It's Manchester City, it's Arsenal, it's live at the Etihad, and it's 2 sides who will not have many options for you on the waivers. However, if Raheem Sterling is free, he could be a decent punt going forwards, as he is bound to get a lot of minutes over the next few weeks. Ethan Nwaneri is almost certainly going to be free. Whether or not he's a decent punt, I'm not so sure, although he did get some minutes in the North London derby, and he will probably continue to get some minutes off the bench over the next few weeks in the absence of Martin Ødegaard. And it is the absence of Martin Ødegaard that presents a huge selection dilemma for Mikel Arteta. And a huge selection dilemma for Mikel Arteta means a huge selection dilemma for draft managers who own Arsenal attacking assets. Do they play Kai Havertz up front? If they do, then there's no Gabriel Jesus and Trossard's minutes will be reduced. However, if they play Kai Havertz in midfield, maybe Jesus will start. Maybe Trossard will start. Maybe even Raheem Sterling will start. Who's going to play on the left? Is it Trossard? Is it Martinelli? Is it Raheem Sterling? Who's going to play at left back? Basically, we've all had Pep Roulette for ages now. Now we have Maresca Roulette. And now, because Martin Ødegaard is injured, and now players could be switching in and out of position for Arsenal, we've now got Arteta Roulette. So there you go, that's a nice happy story to end on. But we've not reached the end yet, because we have not talked Manchester City and Savio, who is a player that I've been worried about owning all season long, because I was certain he would fall victim to Pep Roulette. And yet, so far, he has not. And I'm starting to think Pep will stick with him, because he was a real threat again against Brentford. He played the full game before he had to come off very late on with a knock. Grealish also played the majority of the game. Gundogan got his first start and Doku was rested. So there is no doubt that Pep Roulette is already in full effect, and yet it has not affected the Brazilian. Savio is still playing week in, week out. The Champions League game against Inter Milan is going to tell us a lot. But if Savio does not start that one, and you would imagine that Doku definitely will, given that he didn't play at the weekend, I would be trying to get Savio in on the waivers this week if he is on a free. As for City defenders, that is a very different story because they continue to frustrate. They had a clean sheet wipeout immediately in that win over Brentford. Diaz was rested, Stones was brought out of cold storage for a rare appearance, and Rico Lewis and Vardiol both shared a half each. So if you think you can swap out a City defender for a high value alternative in a trade, I would absolutely urge you to get it done, because as good as City are, their backline continues to frustrate season after season after season, and it's happening again already this season. Cue a clean sheet against Arsenal. So those are some of the players we think you should be considering for your waivers this week, and just a reminder, a few of the key names that we have mentioned: Fabio Carvalho and Kevin Schade of Brentford, particularly if Yohan Wissa's injury is as bad as it looked. Pervis Estupinan, who is surely going to be getting in that Brighton side sooner rather than later. Kadioglu as well. Kieran Trippier, if someone has already ditched him onto the waiver pile, I think it's only a matter of time before he gets into that Newcastle side, given his experience and his influence in that right-back slot. And Jarell Quansah, just on the fact that Liverpool are now going to be playing 3 games a week, and Konate cannot manage more than 17 Premier League games this season. So they are definitely going to have to alternate. So there we have it, but that is almost it for today. Game Week 5 starts on Saturday the 21st of September at 12:30pm BST, with that game between West Ham and Chelsea. The deadline for your waivers is the day before, Friday the 20th of September at 11am BST. We will be back next week, but in the meantime, please do not forget to subscribe to the pod. If you haven't already, please give us a 5-star review if you listen to us on Apple Podcasts, or if you listen to us on Spotify, just write some kind words about us. Leave a little comment, a positive comment. Positive comments make us happy. You can also follow us on social media. We're on X and on Instagram. Our handle on both is at FPL Draft Zone. Easy to remember. It's the name of the show. But that is it for this week. I hope Game Week 4 was a roaring success for you and your draft team. But if it was not, do not worry, because Game Week 5 is right around the corner. Until next time, thanks for listening, and bye for now.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.